again, Andrew?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Octopus.
One thing I would like to mention, if it's okay, is just to let people know that we are broadcasting worldwide.
Yeah.
So if they want to, like when I'm doing this, I don't let my kids be on camera. So any adjustments that they want to make in terms of what's visible,
Right.
just want to
Yeah,
attention.
we want to respect your privacy, so feel free to be anonymized with your Zoom name. Switch on your camera only if you like. Okay. And yes, please drop an introduction like Sangam just did to the chat and introduce yourself. Cool, Sangam, welcome. He has a background in data analytics and working on a DeFi project. All right, Octopus, your turn.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see you all. Welcome. One of the things I wanted to discuss is the structure of the course. And I am dealing with a bit of a cough today, so when I go away, I'm probably dealing with that. But the structure of the course will have 3 parts. We've already had one question. If I don't want to participate on Twitter, will that be an issue? And I think the answer is no, right? The main course thrust will be through Zoom, Discord, and GitHub. And
Yeah.
we'll have our sync meetings in Zoom at this time and place every week. Depending, at least 1 hour, possibly an hour and a half, possibly longer if we have spirit moves and we have good progress. But an hour and a half scheduled for each week. We'll have async discussion in the Discord where you can discuss whenever you like and work in teams. Here you'll be organizing yourself primarily, and we'll be doing lots of discussion. We do ask, in Discord, just be reasonable. Be sure that you're following the policies of the TE Academy. And also, I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to respond at all hours of the day. So be reasonable in terms of how fast you expect, communications. And at least I'm going to take weekends off and evenings my time. So finally, most of our assignments and challenges will be through GitHub. This is a key software tool for all types of projects, even not software projects, but lots of anything that requires detailed project management. So we'll be posting material on GitHub, and as well as things for you to complete and submit as we move towards the NFTs, which we will discuss in just a moment.
Then a quick mention here. You might have heard that TE Academy has been supported hugely by the Retro PGF program at Optimism. And we'll share the course's progress at the Optimism Collective Forum to give them an impression how we put these funds to good use, and also because we'll be running the voting experiments of the actual voting that we'll conduct. So we not only design this mechanism, we'll roll it out and take a decision based on this. And this will take place at the OP mainnet based on the TE Academy NFTs. And we'd like to keep the community posted on this live track. Okay, we can go to the next one. Also some words about our culture and values at TE Academy. So you can find our community guidelines on Discord in a dedicated channel. There's also a form in case you experience any problems, serious issues, and you want to let us know, feel free to reach out. You can do this even anonymously. This should be a safe space for everyone. For this live track, we invite you to be proactive. So to solve issues and make progress yourself, reach out to fellow students, reach out on Discord, ask, and also give support, provide support in case you can. It will be a steep learning journey for every single person, no matter what background you have. And I'm sure you'll enjoy the support you'll receive, and always feel free to ask questions to get support. Also feel free to schedule additional learning sessions in your time zone with fellow students, no matter if this is evenings, weekend times. We want to create teams for making progress. We'll get to this. Just get ready, and also really don't hesitate to create learning groups for going over homework assignments or just instructions where you struggle and would love to join others to achieve your goals. And again, there are no stupid questions. Be mindful when asking for support. I mean, just bluntly, for asking someone to do your homework assignment doesn't work, of course, but once you get support, make sure to say thank you and give back once you have the opportunity. Okay, Andrew.
So we'll be discussing GitHub later in the session, but most of our collaboration on coding assignments and other assignments will be through GitHub. We're going to go over how to work with GitHub to use it for collaboration. Then we'll be actually putting that into practice. And you have the opportunity to earn an NFT, which is just, I'm so proud of my Token Engineering Academy NFTs. I have a few, and they're among my most prized possessions in crypto. Let's talk about how to earn the NFT. So Angela and I put a lot of thought into how to make the NFT meaningful while still accessible. There'll be two components. First, in order to earn the NFT, you need to share the knowledge and skills that you have. In other words, you saw the hashtag give and get. Well, you're going to get knowledge, but you also have to give knowledge. And that's going to be a core component of this. And the second part of this will be demonstrating overall proficiency. Once we verify that you've done both of those things to the standards that we outline, then you get the final NFT for course completion. In terms of sharing knowledge and skills, this is structured similar to a traditional course in a lot of ways. But we're putting a little bit of a crypto points twist on it. So each week, you'll have opportunities to earn points by completing specific tasks. Now, this could be that you submit a markdown document. This could be that you publish or submit your notes to help on the GitHub. Or it could be that you do a code review. It could be that you help someone in Discord. We will have a complete list of tasks and point assignments that evolves throughout the course. And we'll have a template where you can keep track of it yourself. This isn't like truly traditional homework where you have to check every single box for completion, but you need to get at least 30 points total to be eligible for the NFT. There will probably be something like 50 to 60 and possibly even more points available. So you can score as high as you want. And this gives you some degree of choice in terms of doing things that fit what you are interested in and actively able to do. But we're going to be encouraging some of these NFT activities as early as today. Then at the end of the course, you'll complete sort of a capstone project that shows you have actually gained the skills that we were hoping to expose you to and help you master. This will involve coding, analysis, writing, communication, and you can work with one partner on this. We have set a firm limit of 2 as an experiment in the stability of that. So the experiment falls apart if we deviate from that. So we're going with 2. We'll have more details about this before next week's session, but this will be something that we complete towards the end of the course. Angela, did I leave out anything important about that, or is there anything you would add?
I think this sounds good for now. I'm sure there'll be more questions, but yeah, more information on this teamwork stuff coming soon. For today, all good, no teams, etc.
Okay, great. And of course, as we're engaging in this social practice of getting to know one another, you might be thinking about who could potentially be a good teammate that would either reinforce or complement skills you already have. Angela and I work really well together, She is really good at lots of things that I am not good at, and she's very patient with those things, and hopefully we can model some good collaborative practices here. Are there any burning questions at the moment that we should address? If so, if you would please drop them in the chat, and we'll address them as we're able. But I'd like to be sure that we don't run too far over, and so I thought let's move into the discussion on voting mechanisms now.
Yeah. I'll keep an eye on the chat. So far, all good.
I see one question. Will the slides be after class? I think that should be yes, right?
Yeah, slides will be available. And the second question, NFTs expire in 2024. This is the current version of the TE Fundamentals NFTs. If in case you minted TE Fundamentals NFTs already, there is an expiration date, but we are currently setting up the NFT infrastructure and get them ready for the minting period in the study season. So this will be end of June, and these won't have any expiration date anymore, and you'll have the chance to re-mint TE Fundamentals NFTs so that you can make sure that they are valid beyond end of 2024. So no worries here. Thanks for the question.
Cool.
Good.
Yes, very good. So with that in mind, we're going to move to some background on voting mechanisms. The thought here is, in a moment, we'll be discussing the exact voting mechanism project that we're working on. But we want to give just enough background here that discussion can be intelligible to everyone. This is a very deep topic. Our goal here is not to give comprehensive expertise on every possible mechanism, or even all of the most essential mechanisms. This is just a big idea, and it's a starting point for those of you who are interested to dive in. I saw that we had 2 blue sphere emojis indicating people who were advanced in social choice and voting. And I also saw we had a question earlier, what is the difference between voting and social choice? I'm really eager in all contexts for people with expertise to share it. So if you feel there's something crucial that is a point to add, please add it here or in discussion on Discord. But this is a foundational background for the discussion that we'll have in a moment. And our knowledge will gradually accumulate as we have more experiences and opportunities. So we did offer some pre-selected readings and videos that might be useful in framing this discussion, and hopefully you had a chance to watch some of them. Every week I think we will be posting things that will be good preparation for the upcoming week. I just want to give an opportunity for us to frame that exploration. Let's take a few minutes. My plan here is to share a whiteboard and record thoughts. And if we could aggregate collectively, you say it or type it, and I will add it here. What did you get out of that? What do you already know or want to know about voting in the context of this Token Engineering Academy?
So feel free to drop notes yourself or switch on your mic. I think that's okay as well, right, Octopus?
Yes, totally fine if you want to switch on your mic and say it out loud, and I'll capture it if you go that way.
So for me, I just want to raise a voice on voting is voting in most DAOs is it's one token, one voting, plutocracy for quite some time. And people are trying to realize that you have to move on from that one token, one voting. And Common Stack, have come, and different people have come up with different types of voting. I would love to see which much more based on meritocracy, on how you work. The question comes back in how you measure the work, the impact of the work. That will go down. It'll go down to the rabbit hole. So I would love to see how you implement that.
Yeah, very cool. And we'll get to all these questions, super relevant question, and actually motivation for us to run this program. Thanks for sharing. More motivations, more questions. What would you like to learn, explore, try out? Or maybe what have you already learned and want to share it? Okay, can reputation voting be implemented with snapshot strategies? Yes, let's find out, I'd say. I mean, we'll have to find a way to implement it, and we'll have a deadline. So for sure, snapshot strategies could be one route to take. I'll read out Sangam's note in the chat. How can DAO voting can be made ethical given majority of token shares are mainly with project and whales? All right. How can we make DAO voting ethical?
There's one that's being, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go.
I try not to interrupt people. I just got so excited because there was one here that's a key takeaway point from the readings and the videos. There's no best voting method. There seem to be trade-offs, and it depends on the project's context. So to whoever typed that, that's one of the key things that we wanted you to have coming in. That's a key point.
Yeah.
I see that you are, I see the name of the person, so I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Would you like, if you'd like to amplify that, please feel free to unmute yourself or add anything you want to that.
Sure. So I'm Mark, and I'm currently contributing to a front-end DEX, and we're very much community driven and run. And so one of the things that we have come to learn is that there are a lot of different voting mechanisms, like one person, one vote, or plutocratic voting. And right now we have something more akin to reputation voting. And so it's interesting to be working on this with everyone, because there's some application to what we're currently doing there.
Yeah, thanks for these comments. I also want to add, really check out the pre-readings. It's so important to understand that there are so many more variants in voting mechanisms than only just counting votes and summing them up and take the majority, right? And we can explore all of them to find better routes for decision making. Still, they all have their challenges, and this is what we'll explore and try to tackle in this program.
Tiago, I see you have your hand up. Please feel free to jump in as well.
Thank you. My question is more like, if there's no best voting method, and we have some like progressive decentralization, maybe some kind of projects that change the context. So how do we maybe not lose all that has been done, and how do we make sense of the changes that happen in the voting mechanisms? That's one of the questions.
I'd like to offer some thoughts on that. So I thought about this morning. I would not claim the title voting expert. I have taught voting theory in the past and worked in DAOs and different structures. But saying that there is no best voting mechanism doesn't mean it's hopeless and we should just give up, right? It's like saying, okay, I ate dinner yesterday. I had to decide what to eat, where to eat, all these things. Does that mean I solved the problem of eating? No, it means in that specific context, I was able to get the result I wanted. And I think that's the same thing with any type of design. There is no, okay, this is the mechanism, let's use it. Rather, it's about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the different mechanisms and how they apply to the project objectives. because really that's what the mechanism should serve, right? Is we want the project to do this, and the key is finding a mechanism that fits that. There may be projects for which one token, one vote is awesome and works really well, but it does have the risk of centralization. So it's not so much about, it's about having a framework through which we can explore and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the different approaches, so that we can not be surprised when they work a specific way that we might not have anticipated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total. Just thanks
Cool.
for
That's
that.
an awesome question. These are amazing questions. What I want to do is I'm going to screenshot these so we don't lose them. Make sure that we have a record of them. And then I'd like to move, and some of these questions will be things that we are able to explore in the course so far, and some of them will be things that we are going to explore later with what we're able to do in the course. I'd like to go ahead and move on as a quick background for people who may not have as much information to fill in some of these details. So just again, I'm going to stop sharing at the moment and go back to the presentation. So we're going to speed run the history of voting mechanisms and DAO voting in like 8 minutes. Voting mechanisms, essentially, we have a set of voters, a collection of voters, we have a collection of choices. These voters have information about who they are, which could be like the CEO of the company, or they're a citizen of this particular country. They also have preference information, which of these choices they think is best or would rank in order in the decision that they're getting ready to make. What the voting mechanism does is it combines this identity information of who voted for what or who expressed which preference, and it aggregates that into a final decision. Now that's extremely general, and that's by design, because voting is extremely general. And as we go through examples, we'll see some of the ways in which these general principles can express themselves in specific decisions. The first, most basic example that a lot of people think of is what would be called simple plurality, which means each person has one vote. You can vote for at most one choice. I don't believe in compulsory voting, so I'm not going to have to say you have to vote for one choice. You could vote for 0 choices, but you vote for at most one. And then at the end of this, we're going to select one choice to be the final decision. And the choice with the most votes is that selection. This is probably the simplest voting mechanism. And at first glance, it probably feels the fairest, especially if we're able to know who the voters are. But what could go wrong here? And I am asking for quick feedback on what some of the drawbacks might be of this simple, straightforward mechanism.
Any ideas?
Cyber attack, I would say.
What's that? I'm sorry.
A cyber attack. You could fake the usernames. If you don't know the person, then you can have multiple identities and game the system.
Yes, so it is possible, and in a moment we'll talk about a civil attack. Because how do we know that each of these voters is actually an individual? What if people 2, 3, 4, and 5 are actually all the same? That's a real concern if we don't have some type of evidence of identity. At a lower level, there are technical things that could go wrong with this setup that we might not foresee. And so one of the things we're doing here is developing our ability to think through edge cases of, okay, we have this great mechanism, but what could go wrong that we need to think about? So with this setup of 5 voters and 3 choices, with this exact setup, what could possibly happen that would not lead to the outcome that we want?
You can, for example, have a draw like for example, 2 people vote for A, 2 for B, and only 1 for C, so you don't have like a decision yet, right?
Yeah, we could have a draw where A gets 2 votes and B gets 2 votes, and we don't have a tiebreaker mechanism built in. So automatically, we're going to have a war between A supporters and B supporters. What else could happen?
Where, let's say, if people become apathetic over time, which happens unfortunately in a lot of DAOs, you've only got one person voting. They could have kind of total control over the governance.
Yeah, it's possible that only one person votes, which means that this idea we had that this was going to represent a collective decision or an aggregate decision doesn't work. Both of these are risks that are low level before we even get to the situation with what could go wrong in DAOs, which does include things like Sybil attacks. So even the simple mechanism, there are potential issues that we need to think through. And that's what we're going to be doing, is we're going to be looking at mechanisms and thinking, wow, this is exciting and new, but let's take a second and think through what could go wrong and how we would test for those cases. Another model that most people might not think of immediately is what we call dictatorship, which means, excuse me, which means that, okay, maybe everybody gets a vote, but only one person's vote really counts. So whatever person 1 picks is what we get. Is this always a bad mechanism? Well, that's a philosophical question, but certainly it doesn't represent the will of the majority. What could go wrong here is the dictator could be an idiot or an evil person, and that's pretty obvious. But I wanted to take my hand at making a new voting mechanism because I don't think I've ever done that. So I created one called Martian dictatorship. I thought about calling it Octopus dictatorship, but decided Mars was a better framing. In this totally new voting mechanism, as far as I know, there are some number of voters. And there is one special type of voter called the Martian dictator. And their vote counts as N-2 ordinary votes. So in this case, person number 1 would have 3 votes. And everyone else has 1 ordinary vote that counts as 1 vote. So it's the same rules as before. Everyone votes for at most 1 choice. And 1 choice will be selected as the winner, and the choice with the most votes wins. So let's look at this, take a moment and think. This is a technical description of how the mechanism works. What is the practical effect of how we have designed this? And you don't have to be fast. This might be worth looking at and thinking through for a minute. But if you were going to summarize the outcomes of this in a few sentences, let's think about how we could do that.
I think you could have an outcome that is worse off for most voters, and it's not aligned with the other voters' preferences.
This
Yes.
is more of
Go
a
ahead.
weighted voting system where you give more weight to one person vote based on the reputation, based on, they could have a background, I would say specialized background in a subject. For example, if somebody is talking about DAO governance and that person has good background, so you can give more weight to the person based on the background, so they could sway the vote and give more weight to the person who has more expertise, knowledge in it.
Yeah, I hadn't considered the fact that this is a weighted voting system, but it definitely is, right? And by definition. I also agree this could definitely be worse for the majority of individuals. This is essentially dictatorship unless everyone else is unanimous. So this is like a modification where if everyone else agrees, they can overcome the dictator. And that's potentially something like a scenario where maybe you want one person to be responsible for making a major decision, like launching a war. But if it's a really bad decision and everyone else is completely united that it's a bad decision, you want to be able to block it. So there are even situations where something like this might be reasonable. And if I were designing for something where one person could almost always use their expertise, but there were a really strong mechanism to overrule them, this would be one possible way to do that. I just wanted to make up a voting system. Felt left out. Did you see what I'm saying here about what the practical effect is in terms of the surface of what could happen? Does that make sense?
I have a little question about this. That does mean
Yes.
does it mean actually that the voters they sort of like can collaborate before like voted, or how would they know actually who is actually the Martin dictator, and how would they know what would be his choice? Do they have access to those choices before they make their own?
Aha, that's a tremendous question. I'm going to see if I can draw a rectangle here because I want to add that. Hopefully a solid rectangle and not an opaque one. Here we go. It's a great question. What communication is possible before the vote? So a voting mechanism that we're discussing right now is just about how the votes are counted and processed, right? But there's a lot more to voting than that. There's how long does the vote last? There's what information flow is possible before we even get to the vote. And those are bigger questions, right? So this is solely about counting, which is a more restricted question. It's a little bit easier to process, but you're 100% right that something like how long do people know that they're voting? If we say, okay, we're having an election in 3 seconds, that's a very different dynamic than if we're having an election in 4 years. Thank you so much for that input.
Also visibility of other votes, and how this is something that we can take from DAO voting. Can people see the vote evolving? So how the dynamics evolve during the voting, or do they just see the final outcome? It's also an important question. Anything else that comes to mind? Okay, I'm sure you'll find more in the course of this program.
Those contributions were all awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the key takeaway from this is that there are many different mechanisms. There are a lot of things. It's a hard problem finding the mechanism that you want to use that's most effective. And there's actually a theorem that was part of one of the videos, says as soon as there are at least 3 voters and at least 3 choices, any voting mechanism that you want to look at is going to have some type of drawback, some scenario where it leads to undesirable situations, including the possibility that no decision is reached. Unfortunately, we have a tendency in Web3 and DAO space to believe that tokens can fix everything, and that simply isn't true. If anything, introducing tokens rather than meat space identities to the question makes it more complicated and has more issues. So I'm definitely not trying to. I think all of the novel voting mechanisms that have been developed are fantastic, but none of them are going to surmount these fundamental challenges. All of them are going to have some type of drawback. And the key as a designer is to be aware of those drawbacks so you can use them in situations that make sense. So we got to this a little bit earlier when we were talking about voting systems in general, but here I would ask, what are some challenges with using tokens to vote in Web3 that might not be present in the general voting is difficult discussion? And I'll go ahead and put Sybil tax because we don't have proof of unique identity. Oh, I do want to give a shout out to the person in the chat who solved Martian dictatorship. And I missed your message. They did say the dictator gets the say unless everyone else agrees that the dictator is wrong. So thanks. Are there any like and Angela raised one as well, which is voting signal in real time, how that can interact with social dynamics and discussion and things like that. And I'm asking now for people who are very deep into DAO space or have seen a lot of this. Are there any things where you look at it and say, wow, this was an issue with voting for tokens? It wouldn't be an issue in voting in a regular election, even if we had used the same mechanism.
Ark just dropped the message in the channel, vote buying and collusion.
There's
I'd
also
like to think, oh, go ahead.
there's also a problem of nepotism and cronyism, where they don't care about the issue; they care about the kinship. It's a human kind of aspect comes into play. I've seen a lot of them happening in many established DAOs. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. They don't care about the effect of the voting.
Yeah, some similar quotes from the chat. Voting for airdrops or rewards, not really reading the proposals, or delegation to bad representatives and power accumulation. Also conflict of interest, yes.
And if it's on-chain voting, if it's on-chain voting, you have the cost of voting, which for some users on some networks is not really inviting to participate in the voting.
Okay, now, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just going back to what I was saying earlier about apathy, the people who are involved and get a big position in a token-based DAO at the beginning, maybe they, over like 5 years or 10 years, maybe they aren't so aligned with the strategic goals of the DAO over time. Maybe those change, and it's difficult to, when you have someone with a huge token position, it's very difficult to, change the governance parameters if you need to. It can result in like governance takeover and things like that over time.
We didn't say it would be easy, right? Anything else? And then we'll move on to just a few wrapping up this discussion and getting ready for the requirements.
I think as well, I think as well, just the risk of the token standard. Like, let's say if the token is able to be exploited by hackers, then you have like this kind of smart contract risk as well when you're waiting with tokens only.
Yeah, that's infiltration and sabotage. Have you seen that one personally?
No, not yet.
There is an example. There was a group last year or 2 years ago now, and last year, called the Risk-Free Value Raiders, that went and bought a lot of tokens and then started putting fake Discord accounts slowly into discount, and basically did a information manipulation tactic. They were able to they were able to vote to dissolve Rook DAO and distribute the treasury. They affected Aragon DAO as well. That has actually very much happened, that people used voting, and we're going to look at that now. When we're designing a voting system, there are lots of different parameters, and basically we've always looked at this. For instance, can you transfer your vote? And I can't like send somebody else to vote for me in a presidential election, but lots of DAOs have delegating systems. How many votes do I have? In a traditional election, I would expect to get one. Although in the US, there's representation electoral college issues where actually my vote would count less than someone else's in a different state proportionally. How long to vote has already been discussed. How do we know it's time to vote? Do we vote every week? Do we only vote when someone lets us know on Twitter? Lots of decisions that we would have to make in designing a voting system beyond just how the votes are counted. One token, one vote, we've already seen the issues here, discussed the issues. This was actually exploited in an attack on a beanstalk finance. Not only do we have the issue of whales, we have the issue that if you have a flash loan, anyone can be a whale. So what the attacker did here was make a proposal that was a little bit misleading, but then they waited. There was proposals had to be active for 1 day, but then they were executed instantaneously. That was the design. So they waited until the proposal was immediately available to be executed, took out a flash loan, bought a huge number of votes, pushed the vote through, and then it was executed immediately. And this cost Beanstalk $77 million worth of tokens, because the vote was that essentially this one account would be able to take the entire treasury. So one token, one vote has the traditional issues. Even in meat space, pure democracy can turn into mob rule. But in addition, we might say, well, we want something democratic. We want one account, one vote. That's vulnerable to Sybil attacks, which people have already mentioned. There's no way to tell how many people those accounts really represent, at least not without. There's no perfect way to do that. And obviously there are lots of proposed solutions like biometrics and Gitcoin passport style systems, but this doesn't solve the problem. And, I say democracy killed Socrates, because even if we did have one person, one vote, and that were perfectly implemented, that doesn't necessarily mean that we get the best outcome. It's possible that the majority will vote to do something that is terrible for one person and clearly against the principles that we might recognize as being what we want in the system. So there are many voting mechanisms, many voting mechanisms. I didn't want to play favorites with my friends who design voting mechanisms, so I don't want to give examples of Web3 voting mechanisms right now. What I want us to do over the course of the next week, and we can go ahead and start this discussion now if you want to, but it should be an ongoing discussion, is what are some voting mechanisms that you have seen that you like in Web3? Give a reference to it that's easy to understand. Where is it used? And it doesn't necessarily even have to be Web3. For instance, quadratic voting was used by the Democratic Party of Colorado in the United States to determine its positions on different issues, its platform for the upcoming campaign. Maybe you live in a place that has a voting mechanism that might not be familiar to the wider world. Or it can be one that you've seen used in a DAO. What do you like about it? And what potential weaknesses or challenges do you see? I was very inspired because I wanted to have this discussion about conviction voting, which was used for a time in the token engineering commons. And the designers were very forthcoming about what they saw as its strengths and weaknesses. And that's the key. There are always going to be weaknesses. The question is, how clear are we about them? But the other thing we need to be clear about is, what is the mechanism trying to do? What is the larger system that we can, how do we know that killing Socrates was bad? And that's where it gets into requirements engineering. So Angela has far more experience than I do in this domain in industry and through her Web3 work. And I would ask her to lead this discussion.
All right. I can use your slides, Octopus. So just let's go to the next one. Generally, in token engineering, just very much like in software engineering, you start with requirements. So what do we actually want to achieve? We need this fundament of goals we'd like to achieve and also limitations to come up with something, in our case, a voting mechanism that achieves these goals. And in the requirements discussion, it's important to not be afraid to talk and ask any questions. And this is what we are going to do now. It's about covering a problem and a task 360 degrees and 100%, collecting all relevant information for our voting mechanism system design. And in addition to that, we have to capture and document this as a reference for the design process. And we'll have to find proper formats. And as mentioned beforehand, we need people with different skills, and we have obviously a lot of people with a great variety of skills, and we'll need your project management background to properly document and structure the requirements. We need people who collect everything that is relevant, and that's what we do now. So we role play. Andrew and I will start this conversation on the requirements for the voting mechanism. Now I'll be in the role of a client, and to some extent TE Academy is the client, because we want to take this decision who should win the fellowship prize. As I mentioned, we have this first iteration of the fellowship grant. We have invited token engineering researchers and practitioners to apply. We have, in a committee meeting, we've selected 4 candidates. And these candidates, you will find these candidates in our Notion in track 5 to 8, because they'll also run learning sessions. So we have more information available about our choice, since they all run learning sessions sharing their knowledge. And you can find this information track 5 to 8 here. And our voting mechanism has to support choosing the final single winner. And now Octopus and I will have a first conversation on what are the requirements here. And I'd like to ask everyone in the call, take notes, observe, and also then a little bit further down the road, start asking your own questions. And it's important to capture everything, all information we can collect about the requirements of this voting mechanism. Okay. I'll now be your client, Octopus.
Hello.
Hello.
So, it's great to get a chance to meet with you, Angela. How are you today?
I'm fine. Actually, I'm super excited about this new voting mechanism that we need for the TE Academy Fellowship voting.
Excellent. I read some of, we've chatted back and forth. I read some of what you sent me, but I wanted to just start from the beginning and ask, can you tell me the biggest thing that you want to get out of this project? And if you have any ideas about what it would look like if it were successful.
Okay, the biggest thing is that the community for the first time is able to take a decision on what matters most in the token engineering space. And we'll distribute a 10K grant to the fellowship winner. I mean, this is obviously a significant amount that can and will help the winner to continue working on this token engineering research or tools. And this is a big deal. So for the community to be involved in this decision. Nevertheless, this should not be a popularity contest where just tokens count, plutocracy. the token engineering experience should matter. And I'd like to come up with some major, let's say, properties of this voting design that sets it apart from what we have today. And that's why we call it reputation-based voting. It's about the reputation a voter brings to the table to make this count in taking a decision.
So I'm low tech. I write this down on paper and then I check it against our recording of the call. And I'll send you a Google Doc where I capture these things. But what I heard you say was it's very important that community have a voice, and that the reputation of the community members should matter, and that you don't want you want a new mechanism. You don't think any of the current mechanisms that exist are going to suit your purpose. So we need to design a new mechanism.
Correct.
So we'll discuss compensation for this work later, but the other constraint is when do you need this to be functional by?
Oh, yes, this is important. Yeah, we'll announce the fellowship prize winner on July 9th, meaning by then we need the final result. Ideally, I would say with a buffer of 1 or 2 days to just double check. Then, yeah, I mean, we should be able to verify if the voting, if there are any, any attacks. So maybe we should have even a little bit more buffer than only having the result on July 8th. And we'd like to we want to run this voting with the community, and the way we track experience and expertise are the TE Academy NFTs. We have already minted 1,000 NFTs, they exist, and in the course of the study season, many more will acquire NFTs for their successful completion of the live tracks in the study season. And we know that the results of these live track NFTs plus the NFT distribution will be completed earliest on June 10th, right? So the voting can't start earlier than June 10th. And we'd like to give a minimum of around 1 week for the voting to take place, to give everybody the opportunity to vote, and then close the voting in time so that we have a final result on July 9th with some buffer for verification.
So to have the voting starting by June 10th, you probably need the mechanism fully fleshed out by June 1st with...
I think that's too late. Some more things on the timeline. We already, as I mentioned, we already have an implementation of the TE Academy NFTs with the existing TE fundamentals NFTs. Someone mentioned the expiration date, and we have Vitor, who's the responsible developer of our NFTs, and he told me that he needs minimum a week, ideally more, to implement it. And he'd like, so number one, he's available tomorrow, important everyone, tomorrow at 11 a.m. UTC for discussing technical requirements with him, how to integrate the voting mechanism, how to roll it out. And he wants to have a first review mid-May of the voting algorithm, just to see just have a first review of the potential implementation routes we can take. And the mechanism should be ready for implementation by June 1st.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, because I don't have a Solidity or a snapshot background. I was going to ask, it sounds like you have someone to handle those aspects of it. And
Correct.
the key for us will just be to do a handoff in sufficient time to
Correct.
be sure that we have a reasonably validated mechanism.
Right. So
that you can-
Vitor can take the implementation. The role of this group is to spec out the voting mechanism and to provide it in a format that is easily integratable to the existing NFTs. So we'll have to handle these, and to any, let's say, solution that allows us to implement within 1 week. So, I mean, we could, in theory, we could build a whole new application with, customizable weights whatsoever, but this might take us months. We'll have to be able to implement it in a week. This should be doable, given we use solutions that are already out there. And someone mentioned Snapshot. There might be more. It's just these are some of the limitations. We'll have to make sure we do not only design the voting algorithm, we actually use it for taking the fellowship decision.
So I totally hear what you're saying. So it sounds like we need to err on the side of simplicity, or at least working within the infrastructure that exists. There won't be time to build much new. And so that's a constraint that I'm writing down, is simplicity of implementation. I have one more question for myself, and then I was thinking I would open it up to some of the other team members to see what they feel. And I do have a project management specialist who will be turning this into a requirements doc to send you. But I wanted to ask one more question, and I'll open it up to other team members to see what we might be leaving out. How important is it to you that this be, so let me say that some voting mechanisms are difficult for people to understand, even if technically they work well. Like quadratic voting, people really struggle with the math, even though it's a good mechanism. How important
this is
to you community-wide that this be understandable and something we can...
I think this is a good call. I mean, it's almost a philosophical discussion. I think that it certainly has an impact how easy or hard it is to understand how your own voting affects the overall outcome and what's your actual impact. I think that we'll have to find a good balance, because usually but this is something to be found out. I would just claim, proof that it's not true, please. I would claim we either have a very simple mechanism, easy to grasp, like plurality would, and then everybody can easily understand how my own position, my own experience affects the vote. But if we dig deeper, we understand that these mechanisms are also either vulnerable or not ideal. And then on the other hand, we might come up with a really sophisticated design that checks all boxes, or checks all boxes on a good voting mechanism very well, but actually nobody understands, and we'll have not many people vote because it's so yet unintuitive. So yes, it is certainly a factor how we can make this easy to grasp and as transparent as possible.
So I wrote down three I wrote down, now I have 6 like big picture requirements. Community voice, reputation should matter a lot, should not be a duplicate of an existing mechanism because we believe they are unsuitable. We have a very tight timeline in terms of handoff and initial prototype. We need simplicity for implementation, and we need understandability by the community. Just
Sorry, I had to mute quickly. Andrew, Octopus, please switch on your mic again.
Okay, so I have 6 requirements I wrote down from our discussion. Community involvement, reputation is important. Should be a new design. We have a tight timeline in terms of development and handoff. Needs to be simple to implement, and it should be ideally understandable by the, say, average user. Okay.
Sounds good.
I would like to open it to the other team members and see if there are any key questions that they feel I missed. And obviously, we'll continue on this discussion, but I wanted to be sure I captured the big things before going into smaller details. So at this point, I'm going to step out of my role as engineer and ask, as an instructor, is there anything that's important that you think we missed and you'd like to practice asking your questions or recording your thoughts here?
Just go ahead, switch on your mic. Felix, we can't hear you and your contribution would be so important. Can you drop your questions maybe in the chat? Anybody else? Henrik?
Yeah, I think requirements should be scalable as well. I guess most of the empirical research suggests that small DAOs are not suitable for long-term living. So large DAOs are probably sort of a better game, except that it's really difficult. So it should be scalable when you have big democracies. And then also I think something about attention economics. So you avoid voter apathy. So a voting mechanism that keeps people active in the process somehow. Like I think holographic consensus is one of those that actually tries to do that. Not sure, but I think.
Yeah, I would say if I say it should set the mechanism apart, I don't mean that it should be most exotic. It should be to the point of our requirements. On the scalability thing, I would say yes, in general, it should be scalable, but it should first and foremost cater the needs of our community with, at the moment, 1,000 NFT certificates. And yeah, I mean, we don't have to cater for billions of tokens in use. That's also something to keep in mind. And yeah, just 2 comments. And of course, it should be innovative, but this is not equal. So it should fit our purpose, and this will make it innovative. I'm 100% sure, without additional bells and whistles of innovation stuff around it that we don't need.
Joan, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to jump in? And then we have some questions from the chat.
Yeah, I was wondering, Candida, if you have any thoughts on what kind of interaction you would like between the candidates and the voters, and maybe if there are kinds of interaction that you would like to avoid.
Oh, good call. Okay, so it's not only that we want to see interactions, we defined and actually specified interactions, meaning that all of the candidates, 4 in total, run learning sessions. So students, but general, any student is invited to join their live tracks. There will be a smaller group, a subgroup of the total TE community who attends their live tracks and probably knows most about their work. Whereas in parallel, everyone has access to this Discord and the materials and the recordings. So it is possible. So all information is open to anyone, but there might be a subgroup who is more involved, I'd say. They are visible in the recordings. People can approach them and can ask questions. There are learning materials and anything voters would want to know is accessible. That's important to keep in mind. vice versa. For example, we don't have structured and limited application data, like in other, like, let's take RetroPGF as an example, where we have 600 candidates with 12 questions. All of the candidates and application projects have answered in a structured fashion. Here, in our case, we have more unstructured information, while everybody has the chance to meet the candidates even in person if they like.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if this means that those who offer something maybe more approachable, maybe more popular, will get more students who will therefore, I mean, therefore more people will know them and maybe vote for them because they met them in person and liked them. So how does that fit with your requirement that it should not be a popularity contest?
Yeah, good call. So number one, okay, the fact that they share knowledge is something good. So we'd like to encourage this generally. We don't want to limit them. Let's say they should not talk about their work and they should not share links. So this should not be limited. Nevertheless, you're right, it should not be a popularity contest. And our idea is that there are other layers of the voting design where we can counteract pure popularity. Because, as I mentioned, we have this NFT system. We have certain classes of NFTs where we can say something about the voter's experience in token engineering, meaning someone who has acquired and completed the T fundamentals module, someone who, or an NFT that represents being a course author, or being a speaker, or being a live track speaker. And this way we can assign a certain weight to NFTs, so that even in case one of the candidates does huge promotions on Twitter and is giving away, I don't know, even gifts, this huge number of unknowledgeable token engineers should not be able to outvote really experienced people. And in addition to that, also Sybil attacks, even if, in theory, even if someone would set up hundreds of wallets with trying to vote, we can avoid such kind of attacks via the NFTs, because we can, for example, read when an NFT was minted, how many NFTs are being held in a wallet, the combination of NFTs, the certain degrees of experience we can expect behind a certain NFTs, and this way we can counteract pure number of votes or balance.
I wanted to give Felix a chance to try again, and then we have 2 questions from the chat. And then I think just in terms of the session structure, we'll move on to the next thing. That sounds good to you. So Felix, would you like to try again asking your question with your audio set up differently?
Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So a few things. First, I think maybe it would be useful, like just for the timeline, for the implementation you mentioned before, because I already implemented some voting mechanisms in smart contracts, and I think it would be maybe useful to do like proof of concepts during the track, just for the logical part of the implementation, because like Solidity don't have these native floating point numbers. That was a problem I encountered. So maybe just like a basic proof of concept, does this work at all? And like all, I mean, all the other things like these allowances based on the NFTs. I don't include that in the proof of concept, just like for the mathematical part. And this could then also be reused by the implementation. So just an idea.
I like this very much. We have thought about proof of concepts, and maybe Andrew, you can say some words about this, but then generally thumbs up. This is a very logical process in in the design phase, because it's not only about the voting design itself. You have to see if you can make it happen in the system, in the infrastructure we are using.
We will get to that. That's a great idea. We're going to talk about the logistics of developing it in just a moment.
Yeah.
The other questions we had, will there be any incentive mechanisms for voting that need to be implemented?
So Aaron, I take your question as like, will there be a reward for voters? I mean, we have a reward for the fellowship candidates being able to win the prize. What could be the incentive for voters? I would say it's not a must, but we can think of what could be an incentive for voters. Could it? I'm just brainstorming, and but this is about designing a voting mechanism. What about visibility? In this case, would it be attractive for voters to be visible? Would it be attractive to even see a weight or who voted pro and con? I mean, there are not only monetary incentives to be taken into account. Could there be an element of reputation involved for voters? Or could there be, I mean, of course, we can say everybody who contributed to this decision, no matter if taking being part or voted for the ultimate winner, anybody who took the effort to vote receives an NFT that grants additional voting power in subsequent decision making.
Yeah.
These are some incentives we can definitely think about and discuss.
Yeah, to go further, sorry, because if you take it a bit too far, then you actually just break down the authenticity, and if you don't, provide any rewards, then you create friction. So the right balance over there, I think it could be a key factor there too.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
There's one more question. Are you thinking on fundamenting the vote with objective data somehow, like request for an input to justify the vote?
I could not think at the moment of any input or data required, but it's certainly a good question. So one input could be, okay, being eligible to be voted on. So did the candidates accomplish all required, providing and running all required sessions? That's certainly one. We have to see if this is something, I mean, with only 4 candidates, if this should be in code via software. Then another one is, okay, what about voter eligibility? Can simply anyone vote, or only those who can have minimum 1 NFT? Should there be a quorum to take a decision? Time is certainly open voting, closing voting. I mean, generally, in theory, there could be even early voters rewards with additional voting weight the earlier you vote. I don't know. But this is just random ideas.
It's a huge space.
Yeah, it's a huge
We're going to have a conflict between all the things we could explore and the fact that we have to get something workable in the space of a month.
But now, I mean, we can enjoy being early in the stage, open for any ideas. Let's go broad. Let's be, 360-degree. whatever comes to mind. And I mean, again, we'll have to narrow down to then meet technical or time-based restrictions. I just wanted to repeat again, for anyone who's interested in the technical, I should say everybody should be interested how the technical implementation works here. And there will be this call tomorrow. It's open for anyone interested with Vitor to discuss the technical implementations. And this is the A to Z case study. It's about making things happen, rolling things out where you have to at some point deal with limitations and a technical environment, as Felix also just pointed out. Okay, anything else?
I have a requirement that we need to probably move this discussion to Discord at this point. But we need to, I think now we tell people how we can be, what they can do to participate and help us move this discussion forward.
Right. Will you pull up the slides? Okay, yeah. So we have 2 steps here to be completed. And I'm looking for 1 volunteer for this first task until next week. If you have a background in project management, please raise your hands. You can now volunteer and provide an important contribution. And you'll collect your first points. Yes, Sangam. Okay, Sangam, thank you. So please, your task is to please set up a structure for collecting the requirements. To make it easy, let's create a Google Sheet, share it with everyone, drop the link in the chat, and make up your mind how you would structure the requirements sheet. Usually we have some ID per requirement. We have some classification, either technical or design-wise, or incentives, etc. So feel free to come up with a structure and create a Google Sheet. And actually, I think we need the structure by, what did we say? I think some slides later we'll have the deadline again. But Sangam, I count you in for providing the structure. Thank you so much. And then we'll have the second. Yeah, so this is by tomorrow. So the structure and the Google Sheet by tomorrow. And then everybody, this is the second step. Oh, no. Then everybody is asked to add these. Can you go to the slides beforehand? Just to Sangam's. Yeah, okay. So Sangam will set up the requirements list in a Google spreadsheet by tomorrow. And then everyone, please add your requirements to this list by next Wednesday. And then Sangam, please structure them and classify them so that we have maybe 3 to 4 different sections for requirements and have a good overview on what requirements we have to take into account going further with the design. Okay, thumbs up. This was step number 1. And the step number 2 is now, since we have a range of people with writing communication skills in the team as well. If you go to slide 51. Yeah. Oh no, this is another one. Slides up. Yeah, this is the GitHub, and yeah, no, yeah, this 42. Yeah, we need a writing volunteer, and we need this week by week, actually. So in case you feel like, okay, I have a background in writing communications, I'm great in summarizing context, I'm great in providing material and documentation, but I might struggle maybe in Python, this is your chance. We need a writing volunteer to create a summary of what we've discussed today and collect all the links that Octopus shared, the links that were shared in the chat, just to have a good reference for everyone who might be interested in the voting design. Do we have anyone, a volunteer for the documentation and writing part of this? And it can be just week by week, someone else takes over I think we have enough people in the group. Who would take over this first week of I write down what we discussed and collect all the links so that ultimately we have a shared repository of resources and steps we have taken on GitHub? I need a volunteer.
We have 2 volunteers in the chat.
Okay, cool. Let me check. Who is it? Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, watch the video again. Volunteering for writing was Aaron. Okay, Aaron, you'll be the volunteer to document this week's tasks. Feel free to reach out. We'll share the recording on this Notion doc and also in the Discord channel. So no worries, also the slides. And then I think everybody will benefit. Thank you so much, Aaron. Okay, is any questions on these 2 volunteer tasks? All good? Ready to go? Aaron and Sangam? I hope so. Otherwise, we'll be available in the Discord. Thank you so much. Okay, we can go ahead with the coding standards, I guess.
And I'm going to kind of sprint through this because the goal here is not to try to, upskill you to a professional level on these things, but just to introduce them and to give the structure that we'll use for learning about them as a community. I mean, we have a very ambitious challenge. We have to design and validate a voting mechanism that's going to be used for selecting the fellowship winner. So first, we need to make sure we're meeting the requirements and carefully considering it. But also, this has the educational component to it. We don't want it to just be like a few experts who are doing something while everyone watches. We want to find meaningful ways for everyone to engage in this. And finally, we don't want it to be drudgery or a stress hurricane. So let's talk about how we can do that. My goal is not just to build one voting mechanism, but to actually build a tool that will enable us to test lots of voting mechanisms so that anyone who wants to can say, hey, I have this idea for a voting mechanism. Let me sketch it real quick. Let me do some experiments. And it'll be something similar to other open source tools in terms of a domain-specific language. And this might seem like it's more ambitious, but I think it's actually going to make it easier, because then when we're ready to test after we build this, I've already built most of this myself. So I'm going to show my initial prototype and then give exercises for beginners or offer opportunities for experts to improve or test parts of it and be involved in the process in a meaningful way so that we see how to actually build software. Now, there are, and one reason to do this with, maybe we're not experts on voting, is I love this quote by Doron Zeilberger, who's a professor of mathematics at Rutgers University. The best way to learn a subject is by teaching it. 100% agree with that. An even better way to learn it is by teaching it to a computer, aka programming. Because when you're teaching a subject, or when you're coding it, if you're doing it effectively, it requires you to really dig deep on what you know and don't know. Some of you may have prior experience with writing code, and some of you may have more experience than I do. But for this project, I'm going to ask that we, just like our meetings and our teaching, that we aspire to make the code that we write as clean and clear as possible. And I realize this could be a challenge in a tight environment, that it's tempting, and sometimes even in DAO culture, we have this focus on just like hack it together and make it work, and then we'll clean it up later. And sometimes that's unavoidable. I'm not criticizing anyone who has ever done that. But I do think it's important, especially for newcomers to the space, to realize that there are different ways of writing code that have different focuses and different strengths and weaknesses. There's hacking, there's coding, and there's software engineering. So hacking is just like, get it done by any means necessary. It's got to work. It's got to do something extreme. Coding is a bit more structured. Coding can be hacking or software engineering. The software engineering is like token engineering. It's a professional discipline. And software engineering, because it's older, has clear tools and processes that people use to make sure that requirements are met, the public is protected, clients are satisfied, etc. And we're going to figure out how to make it so that we can build these skills through the project learning and experiment with things, while at the same time seeing what some of these best practices look like and putting them into practice. I was really heartened to see that there are some experienced software engineers here, because I'm completely open to their experiences and knowledge in terms of setting out this process. And next week, when we go deeper into what the coding process will actually look like, your expertise will be very invaluable, both here and in Discord. Finally, I have a personal point of objective that I'm going to look for, which is, as a defrocked professor and still active teacher, I want to use this as an opportunity to think about how these tools influence our learning and how we think about our learning. So we have access to GitHub, we have access to AI, to Discord, to all of these tools that weren't available 15 years ago, or GitHub was, but I mean, it's even more prevalent now. And ChatGPT and Discord weren't around. These are very fast-moving tools, and we can look for best practices and how to implement them as we learn and teach each other about these skills. So here are the things that we're handing off to you to complete for next Wednesday. We've already set up the requirements gathering task, which is asking for the 2 volunteers and the note-taking task. So those volunteers have been assigned, and you will get 8 points towards your 30 of earning the first component of the NFT for this course. And then you can earn 2 points by submitting requirements to the spreadsheet. And these can be requirements that you captured from what we discussed, or they can be requirements that you're proposing. And hopefully we can have a format for clarifying the two that will develop in conjunction with the project manager. And then everyone, our goal in terms of software is just to get people started. So right now, I'm going to pull up the task. There's in the GitHub, which we will link to. There's a task, which is located, it's kind of like your first homework assignment. It is it's on the front page. That's not the greatest structure, but I want to be sure that it's completely visible to you. So if you go to week 1 tasks checklist, you'll see a markdown document. First thing we want to be sure is that you have a GitHub account and you know how to fork a repository. So there's some information here on how to get started, and we're also going to ask, as you're exploring this, that if you have questions, please feel free to reach out in the Discord. We're depending on people who know to share their knowledge. Second thing is to complete a brief introductory document, which you will find in the introductions directory. There's a file called helloworld.md. It's a markdown file. And your job is to edit it with some information to help us know you better and shape the course. And then it will be in your repository where we can see it to verify that you've completed it. And the final thing is to get a software editing environment that you feel reasonably comfortable with. Now, if you are already like, I've been using, Nano for 45 years, great, use Nano. This is primarily directed at people who aren't super comfortable with software already, and we're trying to get them to a place where they can be involved in some way with the project, whether that's testing or offering comments or just doing code reviews, things like that. We really do want this to be something where everyone upskills one level. Whether I've never seen a software editor before, to I'm the world's greatest coder, there's something you can do here that will advance your knowledge a little bit. And so this is a flexible task that you get to choose to just move forward however you feel comfortable. And those are the 3 things that we're asking you to do before next week. in addition to our normal engagement in the Discord, which you'll see on Discord. So that's what I have. Angela, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, there was a good question from Henrik on the points to earn, because we said, okay, for example, for the requirements, if you submit a requirement,
This meeting is being recorded.
I think it's 2 points for contributing at all.
Yeah.
And then maybe later we'll have things that multiply, but we don't want someone to complete 15 requirements and then be done. It's a small task with a small weight.
Yeah. Just
You could just put a cap on it,
yeah. Maximum 100. I expect in total 200 requirements items. Okay. No, the goal is to go 100% coverage, 360 degrees. So think of technical requirements, time-based, incentives, number of voters, performance of the system, information we provide prior, during, and after, information about the candidates. There's so much to think about, and I've heard so many good questions, and there might be many more. So add whatever you already can add and ask questions if you think, oh, we still have gaps in the requirements list. And third, take part in the tech requirements discussion tomorrow at 11 a.m. UTC to make sure we have everything covered, because only then we can build a great voting system. Yeah, Octopus also just chat the GitHub link again. Any questions you guys have about this GitHub steps? This will be our shared repository to collaborate. We'll add the requirements lists here as well.
Not a question for the GitHub, but for the conversation tomorrow. Mentioned, where will that take place?
This will take place again on Zoom, and let me just check. This is the same link as we've used today. So you can bookmark this Zoom link because it's for all, whenever we meet for track 4, or generally, it will be in this Zoom with the same link. And just for your reference, you can also find an ongoing session on GitHub. Sorry, on Discord. It's visible on our Discord. In the event section, just for your information. Anything else? We'll share all the links again on Discord. Yeah. The GitHub link, the Notion link. And keep an eye on the pinned message in our Discord channel. So I'll update it in a moment, and then you can find it there.
Yeah, maybe one question, Angela. There were some requirements, so several options, and a minimum number of tracks you have to complete. Can you help me again to which ones these were? I think 1, 2, and 5. Or
okay, so maybe Octopus, can you stop sharing, and I'll show the Notion doc again.
Okay, it's a Notion.
Yeah, so I hope you all know our Notion doc. So it's here. I share it. I just have to find my way in Zoom. in the many tabs open. Okay, this is our Notion doc, central information hub with all information about the live tracks and anything you should know. And here in this section, you see an overview of all live tracks, right? And these 4, track 5, track 6, track 7, and track 8 are sessions and live tracks hosted by the fellowship candidates. These 4 are the candidates for winning the prize. And our voting mechanism has to cater that we have 4 candidates in total and we select 1 winner. And the requirements for them is that they have to run and complete their knowledge session, so sharing the knowledge with students. So basically, all of them have scheduled knowledge sessions, and we should be able to verify, A, have these sessions taken place, and B, yeah, actually have they taken place. Ideally, they also have students attending, but the requirements is that they run these learning sessions. Make sense?
Yeah, I actually meant for all participants to finish the TE Academy. I remember there was an overview that you have several tracks, of course, the fundamentals, and then 1 and 2.
Ah, okay.
But I couldn't find it again, this overview. Yeah.
Okay. So. These are the NFTs. Okay, that's yeah, also a good call. So here, generally, this is really important to understand. We have TE certificates, NFT certificates for knowledge, proof of knowledge at TE Academy. And there are 5 modules in existence since 2022. To better understand how these modules work, feel free to reach out to other students. There are some graduates in the room. And once you have completed one of these modules and you passed an online exam, you are eligible to mint an NFT for such a module. And so far, there are around 950 or so NFTs already minted as a proof of knowledge for passing these TE fundamentals. In addition to that, we have a range of other NFTs. For example, speakers at last year's EVE-CC token engineering track. I think we have 12 to 14 speakers. Speakers at the bar camp. This was an open community event where we also had speakers. We had attendees of EVE-CC. We had attendees of the bar camp. We had course authors for TE fundamentals also own NFTs. And we know the kind of NFT. We know the wallets who or can find the wallets who hold these NFTs and also the date of minting. And via these classes of NFTs, student, graduate, contributor to this space with being a speaker or being a course author, we can define levels or voting weight, saying, for example, someone who has contributed to the space via building a whole course should have very high voting weight, because obviously these people know most about token engineering today and have a good perspective on what this discipline is, for example. Or someone who has already passed all 5 TE fundamentals modules should have more voting weight than someone who is just coming in and just started and even completed module 1 or doesn't have any NFT in their wallet. And this way we can, via the different classes and different types of NFTs, we can find certain weights for the voting. Make sense? Also, happy to discuss this further tomorrow. Peter has built this whole NFT infrastructure and can answer on any other questions you might have regarding, yeah, whitelisting wallets, blacklisting wallets, dependencies that we might be able to integrate. Sounds good. I stop sharing. Octopus, anything else we wanted to share today?
No, I think we covered everything, and I'll be checking Discord for other questions, and I think that's probably the best place to continue discussion in the short term. What do you think?
Right. I'll also double check and share all major links right now after the session in our channel on Discord. And then we can continue the conversation there and meet again, if you can make it, technical requirements discussion tomorrow, 11 a.m. UTC. And oh, finally, I still need the Discord name of Aaron. Can you please drop your Discord name here so that we can sync on the documentation? Okay. That's it for today. Really enjoyed the session, and I'm super excited for our next steps. And I feel, okay, this will be very cool. Super excited for the voting design we will end up with. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Stay in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let's go.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao. Have a great rest of the day.
The recording has stopped.